Hey everybody, welcome back to DJ Tutorials, and this is going to be a new series on modeling a wrench in Blender. It's going to be sort of like a beginner to intermediate hard surface modeling project. And if you haven't yet, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, and it's super easy for you to do. We also have a Discord server if you're interested in having some questions answered or just collaborating with some other artists. And if you'd like to help donate to the cause, like these really cool people that are scrolling down below on the bottom of the screen, please consider becoming a patron. Both links are down below in the video description. So this is pretty much where we're going to end up with right here. We are going to be sculpting out the head area here where you would be sort of like screwing in the bolt. We're going to be making this neat little indented section here with some cool text. And we're going to be making this sort of scalloped section over here. And we're also going to be making this kind of neat little material for it. It's probably not 100% accurate, but it looks good enough to show you guys for a quick tutorial. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've done this tutorial or at least created this object about 6 different times, and every time I've done it a little bit differently each time. And we're not going to be doing everything according to the most easiest, best way possible because it's very rare that you're going to really have the time when creating objects like this really quick for a client or something like that. You may not have a whole lot of time to do everything 100% perfect. You might just need to get the render out. So I'm going to be showing you sort of a mix between doing it right, good enough to where you don't run into any major issues, but also just bypassing a few sections that could use a little bit more work, but we're just going to bypass some of those areas because when we do a render it might not be really noticeable. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn back on the overlays, and I'm just going to turn off all the collections that are up here on the right. I have, like I said, 2 different ways of doing this wrench. Here's one way here that I did with this little sort of like uh, sheared look like this. And I also have another that looks like this that I just showed you. So the first thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure that you have reference material. And you can easily go onto Google to find these things, but really what you want to find is something like this, which is basically just a top view of the object you're trying to create. And what you'll want to do is make sure you have a couple other references. I really just got this one because it's pretty obvious what's going on here, or at least pretty clear to me since I've done it so many times. But you might want to get a couple more reference pieces so that you can really create something that looks unique and interesting to you and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and get started here. So first, what we're going to do is I'm just going to simply drag and place my top view of the wrench reference right here. And I'm just going to rotate this by holding Control. And we're going to scale this. Actually, we're just going to keep it as it is. And we want to sort of create a little bit of a opacity here so that we can see our grid line through it. And we want to make sure that this is sort of lined up as much as we can to be sort of like even, this top part and the bottom part, because it'll be a little bit difficult when we start modeling if we have a little bit of an angle with our reference piece. So I'm just going to hit R and hold Shift and try to get this roughly as even as possible, something like that. And we're also going to grab this on the Y. I just hit G and Y to lock it down, and I just want to get this to where it's roughly close to be even with these grid lines here. Hopefully you can see that. And now you should see on the bottom left the keyboard and the mouse so that you can see all of the keyboard commands that I'm doing and follow along. So how we're going to start this out is we're really just going to start with some bare basics. I'm going to kind of show you how to keep an eye on some edge control and how to create a circular piece like this when you're starting with this sort of flat piece here. And then we'll talk about the indented area like this in a little bit. So I like this as a practice because a lot of people use things that are very symmetrical. This is asymmetrical. And there's a little bit of nuance to how to model this. It's not as easy as just a box or a crate or something like that. This actually requires some thinking on how to do some edge control, especially on this transition here, how to create that sort of curved effect here, and then also that circular area right here for this scalloped look. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do to start off with is we're just going to add a plane by hitting Shift A to add, select the plane, go into edit mode, and make sure that you are selected on vertex. 1, 2, and 3 are going to go between the vertex, the side, or the edge selection, and the face. So make sure that you're using those hotkeys when you can to get used to that because it does save you time. Go into wireframe and let's just scale this down. And what we want to do here is just get an overall shape going on. So let's hit S To scale, lock it on the X by hitting X, and then scale it out like this. And you can see that our reference material is not quite even. You can see that here, the taper needs a little bit more to go up, and then here the taper already begins. So what we can do is go out of edit mode here by hitting tab, grab our reference material, hit G to grab, lock it on the X by hitting X, and then just moving it over a little bit. And we're going to do our best to try and keep this as symmetrical to begin with, just so that we get a nice even flow starting. Going back into edit mode here, scaling it on the X and just sort of dragging it out. Make sure that you have up here the transform pivot point is set on the median point, because that's going to be the point in between everything that you have selected here. The next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to hit 2 to go to edge select and select these two with shift. Hit E to extrude. You can see they're extruded right here. Right click to set them right back where they were. Hit S and then lock it on the X by hitting X and then pulling this out. And then we're just going to scale this. But on this one, we're actually going to change this to individual origins up here where it says the transform pivot point, individual origins, S, Y to lock it on the Y, and then we'll just do it like that. And we're basically going to start to create that sort of taper effect there. Now we're going to leave this part for later. We're going to start working on this section. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So when you start to create shapes that look like this, that's coming from something like this, you really have to start thinking about the overall shape and the edge control. What we'll want to make sure that we're doing when we're creating this is that this edge, when we do a loop select, using Alt and left click, we want to make sure that that loop gets selected all the way around here. Because that's going to allow us to make the alterations to the bevel shape or the edges and be able to clean up stuff a lot easier if we make sure that we're doing that. And one of the ways, or the best ways that I can kind of explain this is if I hit Shift A to add a circle, for example, and I go to the vertex select here, so you can see it's selected, and I grab it, lock it on the X, and move it over here and scale it down. You can see that we're kind of starting with a circular shape here. You see that? And if I hit E to extrude, right click, and then scale in, and I look at this in solid view and go to the face select here, you can see that if I hold Alt and I left click, that it's all this edge here, this loop. Okay, so I'm selecting this loop of faces. And if I select the edge on the outside using Alt and left click, you can see that I'm grabbing that entire edge loop. What we don't want to happen is that when we grab this, it gets cut off or something weird happens, okay? So you just have to be aware of that when we start to create shapes that look like this. I'm calling it the head shape of this particular wrench here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this by selecting one of these loops and hitting Control plus and then X to delete the vertices. And if we take a look at this all together, we know that we need to create this sort of circular shape where the edge loop is being controlled. And we also know that this is going to have to be indented at some point. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to hit Control R to add some loop cuts. I'm going to hover over this section and roll up on the middle mouse wheel. And then I'm going to left click to set that and right click to place it back where it was. And we really don't have to move this stuff in here right now. We can just kind of leave this where it is. But this is going to help us to start to create some of this edge loop information as we create this piece here. Now, one thing that I sort of mentioned was that we need to make sure that when we create this, there has to be that sort of like circular shape. And we could just add a circle and then start to connect things together. But we should be able to just grab this information here and start to create our new edge loop shape just by extruding these here. So let's try to do that. So I'm going to hit E to extrude and rotate. And I'm just going to start to do this throughout creating this whole piece here. I'm going to try to create a geometry that's going to allow us to have this sort of edge loop going on around the edge here. So basically all I'm going to be doing is hitting E to extrude and then just sort of clicking on the vertices and placing them where they need to be, and just I'm going to be checking to make sure that that edge information is actually happening. Now you can see here, I'm already running into an issue. When I try to add an edge, what is it doing? It's trying to cut across this way, all the way down that in that direction there, or it's trying to cut straight across. It's not trying to create an edge loop where it kind of goes around in this sort of circular shape. So I need to start to control that. So how we do this is we're going to select this edge and we're going to delete that edge. And we need to start to sort of build this in a different way. And If I hit Control R and I sort of hover in this section here after I deleted that edge, you can see that it creates this edge loop right there. And you can see that this can kind of help guide me. So if I take this and I extrude and rotate, and I just sort of extrude and rotate this around, I can start to create this edge loop information where that's always being controlled. So let's just quickly go through this section where I'm just extruding, rotating, and moving it along this edge, and then we can see what we can do from there. So we've gone ahead and we've created this sort of like ring around this edge here, but we're going to run into a little bit of an issue with all this stuff up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all these, we're actually going to delete those, and then we're going to move these up here like this, just to see what kind of shape we're creating. And you can see here that we're still maintaining that edge loop, which is where we want it to be, but we're having a little bit of an issue right in here. So how we can deal with this is we can start to merge some of these vertices together, and we can add some splits where we need it. So you can see right here, we want this and this to merge together. So we can merge that at the last one, and we can just double check to make sure that our loop is still intact just by doing that there. And right here, we can merge these together by hitting M and merging it at last. And then we can see that we have these two right here that we can merge together, merge that at last. And now we have a little bit of an issue where we have this that doesn't have a split, but we do need a split right here. And this is where a perfect opportunity for the knife tool to come in. So if you hit K, you can actually hover over an edge like this, left click, drag to another position like this here, left click again, and then hit enter. And then we can take this one and this one, merge it together at last, and now we have this geometry here. And you can see here that we don't have enough geometry to really hit this curve a bit, so we're going to hit Control R to add a split here, grab this vertex and move it up here, grab this one and move it here, and just sort of follow the general shaping of this wrench shape to get what we need out of the vertices that we do have. One trick that you can do if you find that you're just moving around vertices a lot and you don't want to have to keep hitting G to move it around, if you go up here, you can select the tweak, and then you can simply click and left click drag these vertexes and just move them where you need them to be. And as you can see now, after I move that stuff around, if I hit Control R, I still am maintaining a nice edge loop around this area. So when we start to add some bevels and doing some other things like that, we can see that there's a change in our edges here from here to here. And we'll be able to control the tightness when we start to create where the top or the head of this wrench is sort of being extruded out. We'll be able to control where that is. I'm going to right click to cancel that. So let's just leave this as is, and let's just say that this is good for now, because really what we want to start to do here, and what we always kind of want to do is we want to start to just sort of put in the major shapes. That way that we can start to deal with the more complex areas or the more detailed areas later and make sure that our overall shape is intact and looking good. So we don't waste time on details when the overall shape looks really messed up. So now let's go ahead and we're going to take a look at this sort of scalp shape here. And we're going to, oops, I forgot to turn off tweak there. So let's go up there, change that to box select, left click and drag. We're going to grab this, lock it to the X, and just sort of start to move this around a little bit to get it out of the way. And what we'll want to make sure is we want to make sure to maintain a sort of symmetry across here. So I'm going to grab this, lock it on the X, and move it over like this, just to make sure that we can kind of keep that intact and it doesn't look a little bit off. As you can see, because this is not symmetrical across the axes here, we can't just simply use a mirror modifier. If you were questioning why I'm not doing that, you can't just take that shortcut to do that. You have to be really careful sometimes with some of this stuff. And if you ever do make a mistake, you can always, let's say you move this on accident like this, and you didn't really know where to put it. A sort of simple way to fix that is if I delete that vertice, I grab the one that's mirrored across like this. If I hit Shift D to duplicate that, right click to place it back, and then change this to 3D cursor, hit Shift S to snap the cursor to the world origin to make sure that it's dead in the center. I can actually take this scale across the Y, -1, and you can see that it's now mirrored across the other side just like that. And then you can grab all of these or select them all, hit F, and then it will add a face there, and now you'll have the symmetry you need. So if you ever find that you need to do that with some of these vertices, you can always do that trick. So you might be wondering, how are we going to get this scallop shape that has all this other geometry here, how are we going to connect that to this low geometry area right here? And really what we're going to do is we're going to hit Shift S to add. We're going to add a circle. And what we need to do is make sure that we have the right vertice count. Okay? And you can see right there when we added it, there's 32. If we zoom in on this section right here, we just need to count how many of these areas there are because we need a vertex point for every time it goes in and out like this. And I know that the actual count is going to be 24. Okay? So if I zoom out here and I grab this on the X and shift it over here, and then I scale it. Whoops, it looks like I have it on the 3D cursor there, so let's change that to individual origins. If I scale this down like this, I can start to place it where it needs to be. So let's just place it right here, just for now. Maybe make it a little bit smaller, grab it on the X, move it over, and maybe we'll just place it here. What's very important to point out at this point is that what we really want to strive for is getting as close to detailed or as close to correct as we can, whereas also keeping track of our time and making sure that we're not wasting our time on things that don't matter. So what we know we need here is we need to have some of this stuff scalloped in like this here, and we need to transition from a bar shape here to this sort of circular shape. So what we need to do is we need to eventually connect this stuff together so that when we extrude this out and start to make the scallop shape, that we connect this geometry. And to maintain, we really want to do is we want to try to maintain as much as possible this shaping right here, if we can, as far as the edge loop, so that we can control some more stuff when we start to add some details like bevels and add some edge sharpening and things like that. So what we can do here is we can just start to connect some of these things together. And I'm going to use F here to connect these to make a line. You can see there's an edge there. And if we take this here and we hit F, you can see that there's another line there. But you can see here, we basically have an n-gon. If we select all of these edges, if I go to Edge Select, and I hold Shift and I select all of these and I hit F, we have what's called an n-gon. So that means that the face has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertexes instead of 4, which is what would be a quad based, and that would be generally considered to be a good geometry. Now we're going to take a little bit of a shortcut here because, again, sometimes you can take shortcuts. And what we'll do is we'll take these here, and we'll make a face out of that. And we'll take these here, and we'll make a face out of that. And we'll take these 2 points here, and we're actually going to extrude this. And we're going to lock it on the X, and we're just going to pull it over like this. And then we're going to make sure that this is set to the median point, our pivot point here. We're going to change that to the median point, and we're just going to scale that a little bit just so that it maintains the same distance from each other. And we're going to actually create a quad-based geometry on these edges here. So I'm just going to select these here, hit F, and select these here, and hit F. So how are we going to deal with these sections right in here? And really all we need to do to just make this work for our purposes is create a cut right along here. And how we can do that is by hitting J. And that's going to create a quad here, and it's going to create a try here. Now we could start to add more geometry on other parts of the object and all that kind of stuff, but we're not going to do that for the purposes of this tutorial because sometimes doing stuff this way is just what you can do or you need to do just to get stuff done quickly. And so we're just going to create some tries. Let's actually do this the opposite. So I'm going to select this edge here. I'm going to hit Control X to dissolve. Whoops, I actually don't want to do that because it looks like it's going to get rid of that point there. So what we want to do is just delete this edge. So select that, delete edge, and then go here. And I'm just going to hit face this time for those 3 because I know I'm making a try there. And I'm going to select these 4 and hit F because I know that I'm going to make a quad there. So from here, what we can do is we can hold Shift and Alt to select this outside edge here, hit E to extrude, right click to undo anything that we might do there, and then just start to scale this in. And I want to set this a little bit close to sort of like where the outside edge might be for this sort of scallop shape here. And then what we can do is we can go up here to select, checker deselect, and you can see that now it's just deselected every other point. And what we want are the ones that go in this scallop shape here. So where it says offset right here, if you click this, oops, let me just make this where you can actually see it. So at the bottom left there, you can see it says checker deselect. If you change the offset count right here by clicking this over, then you can scale this in like this, hitting S and then pulling this out a bit. And we can start to create a sort of scallop shape. Now it won't really be that noticeable until we start to extrude this out. So let's go ahead and we're going to start to extrude some of this, and we're going to add a subdivision surface modifier and do some correcting of some of the geometry that we've created here. So let's hit shift to go out of edit mode, and we're going to press Control 2, which is going to add a subdivision surface modifier. Go over here to the modifier properties, and you can see that it added a level 2 here. And if you didn't want to use the hotkey, you can just go over here to add the subdivision surface, and you would see the subdivision surface modifier placed. Let's go into solid mode and just take a look at what we've done here, and you'll start to see there's some weird stuff. If we turn off the viewing of our empty here, or the image, you can see that it looks like our image has two different colors to it. And if it looks like my solid is a little bit different from yours, go up here to the top right, change it from studio to matte cap, and then change this to something like this one here, which I find a little bit hard to look at when I'm looking at people's tutorials and stuff, so I tend not to use that. You can go up here and change this to something else like this shiny one right here, and you can see what's going on. You can see this part looks dull, and you may see that or you may not. And if you do, what it means is that your normals are flipped on one of these areas. So if I go back into edit mode, hit Alt A to deselect everything, and go up here to the viewport overlays, go down here where it says normals and select this on, you can see that there's some of these rods are pointing down and these ones here are pointing up. And that means that the normals, or how the light is hitting this particular object, it's hitting it one way here, and then over here it's hitting it the other way. So this is flipped over here. So if we hit A to select everything, go to face select, go to mesh, go down to normals, and then click or select the recalculate outside, which is shift N. You can see that now that has been fixed, and any other sort of slight issues that you might have seen might have been fixed there as well. Now it's also possible that you have accidentally at some point created some doubled vertexes. So for example, if let's see here, if I took these and I hit E to extrude and right clicked, I might not see any issues now, but later when I start to do more editing, I might see an issue in my mesh when I, let's say, extrude this up and start to move things around. There might be some issues. So what I always do whenever I'm putting things together and I'm modeling, every so often I'll hit A to select everything, in the vertex select, hit M to merge, and then click by distance, and you can see right down here at the bottom it says remove 26 vertices. So 26 vertices were stacked up on top of each other, and if you do see some errors, that might solve some of the issues that you're seeing. Now, oftentimes what we really want to do is we really want to make sure that we're maintaining an edge control, meaning that if we ever need to make some adjustments with this edge loop here, we want to make sure that we have some sort of safety net, because right now you can see that we have, when we hit hold Alt and left click, we don't really have a perfect edge loop going around this particular edge here. So we kind of need some sort of way to transition into this area that's going to end up looking like, if I could pull this open over here and go to the image editor, and I'm going to pull open this one. Actually, let's just pull open this one here. If we look at this section right here, we want to make sure that we want to maintain a sort of edge around this particular area here in case we have to do something with it. So what we might want to do here is, and I'm just going to collapse this, what we might want to do is just take this edge loop here, X to delete, delete those vertices, and take this here, hit E once, pull it in a little bit to make sure that we maintain that edge loop, hit E again, scale it in, and then redo. Oh, it looks like we have some flip normals again here. That's okay, we can solve that again. But if we create this sort of edge loop here, you can see now we can control that edge, and there's a nice transition between this section here and this section here. And if we ever need to, we can always dissolve this later too. So we just have this for safety just in case. Then we can select all of this here, and we can hit 7 to go to the top view, turn back on our reference material, go to wireframe, and we can go to select, deselect the checker, and it's still saved from the offset down here. Scale it up, and we can then make sure that our object has a nice little scallop here. And if we do need to pull the other ones in, it looks like I want to actually pull some of these in a little bit more. I can Alt left click to select everything, go to select, check or deselect, and then just change the offset to a 0 or a 1, depending on how I'm doing this here. We can pull this in, and then if I want to, I can grab the other ones as well and pull those in or push them out however I want to do that. And we'll also want to make sure that we recalculate our normals. So we'll select everything, make sure we're on face select, go to mesh, go to normals, and we will recalculate the outside. And there we go. So now we're at a point with our object where we can start to sort of fine tune a little bit more of the concepts that we want to solidify with our object. So if we go into the edit mode here, and we select the face here and we select the edge that goes around here, we can actually extrude this and it will automatically lock on the Z, and we can pull this up like this. You can see now that we have some depth there. And if we actually grab everything with A, grab it on the Z to pull it up, we can actually start to create some depth along the edge of our object in the negative direction going down here. And what we'll do before we start doing that is we're going to create a mirror. And over here, we're going to make it on the Z so that it shows up down here. And go to Edge Select, grab all of our edges by holding Shift and left clicking all of the edges here. And we can hit E and then lock it on the Z and pull it down. And you can see that if you start doing that, it could go right through each other. If I zoom in a little bit here and I grab it and pull it down on the Z, you can see it goes right through. So make sure that you select the clipping here, grab it, lock it on Z, and then it will just go into itself and it won't be a problem. Now, one thing you might be wondering is how I'm getting this really cool look on the edge of my object. If I go into object mode here and we take a look at it, you can see that I can see all this stuff right here, and it looks really neat. Oh, looks like we got to fix this here. But you can see that I can see some of these like really sharp edges here. If you go up here where it says the viewport shading, you can go down and click on this thing right here that says cavity, and it will start to show some of the inside sections, and it will sort of point out some areas that might be of concern on the geometry, and then we can start to fine tune some of those. But if we take a look over here, it looks like there's an area that didn't get extruded down. So if we go back into edit mode, we can then grab the vertices around this area here, and we can hit E, lock it on the Z, pull it down, and then we can hit 2 for the edges, select these here, and hit F to create a new face, and the same thing at the bottom here. And now we have those areas all closed up. And of course, what I always like to do, go to vertex, select here, hit A, merge by distance, and make sure that you don't have any vertices that are stacked up on top of each other, because sometimes that can be a real bother. Well, hopefully you're able to follow along with this part and you're excited to see what we're going to be doing next. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so that you can see when that comes out and you can follow along as soon as they are released. And I will see you all next time.